Hi everyone, welcome to this exciting session on BFS market modernization and demand trends in APAC. Thank you for joining us from different parts of the world. It'll be great if you can jot down on the chat from where you have joined in, and we'll be happy to answer any questions you have. Um, Stepping into the topic with our latest conversations with enterprises and service providers, we have identified that this is a trending topic of interest. Um, Recently, IMF has shared an optimistic economic outlook for APAC, with growth projected at 4.6% for 2024. And this region is expected to contribute over 60% to global growth in 24. The inflation rates have decreased, um, providing some economic relief. The rising risks due to geopolitical tensions, the Russia-Ukraine war, the war in the Middle East, and there is uncertainty in global demand and potential financial volatility as kind of having a negative outlook, even though the growth has been good. The aging populations in APAC regions may hinder economic activity, and there is more accommodating monetary policies anticipated to boost economic activity in 25. So in this session, we will discuss about the key business, technology, and sourcing priorities of different regulations in Asia Pacific, the future operating model, the role of core modernization in driving transformation, and the role of service and technology providers in helping banks modernize. Before we begin, quick introduction from all of us. I'm a VP here with Everest Group, leading the BFS research. I have a background in consulting and I've been advising banks and financial institutions all my life on their transformation. I have a keen interest on financial crime compliance and regulatory challenges overall, and the modernization been a very key topic in my life. I have with me two brilliant colleagues, Pranati and Kriti, who will now introduce themselves. Pranati, over to you.
Thanks, Suman. Glad to be here. I'm Pranati Dave, practice director with the firm. I co-lead the BFS technology and IT services practice, with Kriti and Suman. Been here at the firm, spent over about 7 years at the firm, supporting enterprises on their sourcing and IT decisions. Beyond that, I'm also a mother of two kids. So again, juggling with the role of corporate and home has is something which at the moment I'm grappling. Over to you, Kriti.
Thanks, Pranati. Thanks, Suman. Hi, everyone. Glad to be here today and sharing our insights and perspectives with you. I'm Kriti Gupta. I'm a practice director at Everest Group, and I co-lead the BFS Technology and Technology Services Charter here. Looking forward to sharing our perspectives today with all of you. I think APAC as a region is very vibrant, very dynamic, and as part of my role tracking the various technology themes, IT themes, sourcing themes in this industry for the past 7 to 8 years, we do have some interesting perspectives to share. So let's kick it off, Suman.
Thank you, Pranati and Kriti. We'll start with the trends. So, Pranati, what have been the most exciting drivers of change in the BFS landscape in this region, right? And what have you seen recently?
Yeah, thanks, Suman. So if we look at the overall BFS technology and IT services market, and even the broader business in Asia Pacific region, we very interestingly we just did our report on broader APAC market some time back. I think that's something which we are also offering as a a complimentary read. What we have noticed is that there has been a push towards open banking from a regulatory standpoint, which is different from some of the other regions. It's sort of emulating from the European markets, but yes, if you look at markets such as Australia, Singapore, Hong Kong, there's a huge push towards open banking initiatives. There is a promotion of data sharing, transparency, customer centricity. So that's again something which we are noticing in very very pertinent in the APAC market, that there is a huge focus on keeping this customer at the center and designing, regulations, technology all around it. The next is, I think, the whole focus on neobanks, digital banking. There is a rise of digital only banks and neobanks in markets such as South Korea, Japan. Southeast Asia market is also there's a huge overlay of neobanks that are coming up. They're offering seamless app-based experiences, and this is again something very core to the APAC market. How they are targeting the the undeserved segments of the population. So the whole gamut of financial inclusion, which we see very different from some of the other developed markets. And the other is, all this keeping in mind that how do you redefine customer experience? Ecosystem partnerships is again something which we are noticing very different from what is happening in the other markets. Specific areas such as payments, lending, and insurance, huge ecosystem collaborations have been seen. The other is, I think no conversation at the moment is complete until and unless we talk about AI. In APAC, there is a focus on AI driven personalization. So how do you analyze customer behavior? How do you analyze financial patterns? Banks are offering tailored recommendations and proactive financial advice, again creating more customer centric experience. Last but not the least, I think I alluded to financial inclusion and microfinance, but let me end around the focus on sustainability and green finance. APAC banks, they are increasingly aligning with the global sustainability goals. They are offering green loans, sustainable investment products, climate friendly financing. So there is a growing emphasis on ESG, overall criteria, and it is driven by both regulatory pressure as well as the investor and customer demand around it.
That's interesting, Pranati. I think the sustainability part is possibly yet to be seen in terms of traction, and how the customers also would lean towards products which are possibly aligning to the global sustainability goals. But digital transformation is such a buzzword these days, right, Kriti? And how do you see that in evolving in the banking sector, right? And how does it impact the banks in APAC over the next few years?
Yeah, an interesting question, Suman, because as we look at digital transformation even globally, APAC is definitely one of the front runners. I think you alluded to it in the beginning, the vibrancy of the region, the strong macro factors, the digital penetration, the themes of financial inclusion, the digital maturity, both from the end customers and the banking enterprises, all of it make this a very ripe playground for this digital transformation to happen. But what is essential to be looked at here is the foundations remain the same, right? The foundations of your cloud, the foundations of your AI data is what makes it very, very important for this digital transformation to occur. If I look at from an APAC lens, I think APAC as a region, we have seen this push from a lot of government bodies, also licenses being handed out to a lot of digital banks, neo banks. I think this was a big wave in the last 5 to 7 years. I think DBS made a big wave when it announced its open banking API developer platform back in 2017, and there was a host of licenses being given out in the region to neobanks, digital banks. All of these have pushed the overall maturity in the region. And if I look at the other two levers that make this digital transformation really important, I think the role of cloud cannot be really overlooked. So we see a lot of push from the hyperscalers also in ramping up their investment. So very recently, we saw AWS announcing its Malaysia region being set up. I think it was just a couple of months back. And there is renewed interest. Even the GCPs and the other hyperscalers are ramping up investment. So there is ample talent that is also feeding into this entire digital transformation bit. And I think lastly, AI is something like Pranati said, right? No conversation is complete without AI these days. And I think these days we have agentic AI also coming up. So we are seeing, I think all of these dynamics are just making this a big buzzword. If I look at just AI alone, I think OCBC has this OCBC Buddy and the Wingman, which are these AI powered assistants that work behind the scenes and help customers interact in a better manner with the bank, and all of these things are I think really, really crucial to make this digital transformation successful.
Yeah, that's interesting, right? And with all this technology and legacy debt, which a lot of banks are facing, helping them launch new products and improving customer and employee experience has been quite challenging, right? If they don't overcome those debts which they have. To implement something as complex as AI and ML models in hyper personalization and other areas, I think they have to completely rehaul their systems, possibly also focusing on governance as a key area, right? But with all the serious conversation, would want to shift to a fun question now. Um, Kriti, if you had to pick one technology, right, that's set to shake up the entire BFS industry in APAC, what would it be and why?
So I don't know if my answer would qualify as a fun answer though, because I would stick to the fundamentals because I really believe cloud is going to be that game changer. A lot of enterprises are still figuring out what to do in their cloud journey, right? I just a few minutes back talking about digital banks and neobanks, but hey, we cannot ignore the larger set out there, the banks that have been there for decades, the modernization journeys they are undergoing. Many of them are very well advanced, but cloud still remains, I would say, a black box in many cases because there's this big question. Hey, what do I do? Do I go private? Do I go public? Do I do something that is hybrid? Do I invest into a multi-cloud kind of a scenario? What do I do with my data centers? Do I let go of my mainframe? Because the banking industry is such, it is so heavily regulated and it is so heavily the impact it has, right? It moves money, it moves goods, and with that it moves people's expectations and the ambitions, right? So banks do not have that luxury of shutting down shop for even a minute or a second. I think we have seen the chaos it brings. So I'll stick to, I would say, cloud will be that technology that will continue to shake up this industry.
That's an interesting perspective. Pranati, do you differ, agree? What about you? Which one do you pick?
I agree 100% with Kriti because cloud and data, they are the bedrock. But, again, just because I believe that when it comes to game changing, I believe AI is the one that might be a game changer. There are certain reasons, and, why they are important from the APAC market is, it's revolutionizing the overall banking sector. Kriti alluded to the examples around OCBC, some of the other banks such as DBS. So if you look at markets such as China, India, Japan, Singapore, South Korea, they're heavily focusing around AI. They're leveraging AI to not just enhance customer experience. I think we talked about that. Bringing in chatbots, robo advisor, personalized financial recommendations. The other piece, and I know, Suman, it's very close to your heart, is the whole gamut of fraud detection and risk management, which AI models are sort of creating. They're analyzing the transaction patterns, they're detecting these anomalies, and bolstering cybersecurity in general. Again, adherence to KYC and AML, it's important from a regulatory standpoint. There's a huge focus, as well as you want to ensure that fraud, especially when you're doing financial inclusion. There are people who are not even aware of how do you sort of ensure security in a transaction. How do you ensure that frauds don't happen? In that case, it's important that you have models in place around it. Very broadly, we just did a research focused on a global research. But again, if I look at the APAC, the sentiments from the APAC market, banks and financial services firm in APAC, they have suggested there's value in embedded nature of AI, and across products and across services. The other is again alluding to the fact around risk, legal, and data. They are sort of the roadblocks in making it from scaling up the overall AI enablement. How do you scale that up? Legacy, I think, very close to Kriti. You must deal with with the challenges around legacy, and banks across APAC are sort of struggling. We see that struggle in the Indian market. We see that struggle happen in advanced markets such as Singapore also. And last but not the least, how do you make sure the negative impacts on AI on sustainable IT goals, they are being pushed out? So again, this is how I would like to conclude from our recent research on the broader AI spectrum.
Thanks for adding those insights, Pranati. I think that was an interesting research, and people should go and read through it. There are these local regulations in all these APAC countries as well, I think, which are possibly not coherent, and people are just figuring out how they can go about this journey in each of these countries. And there are certain banks which operate across, and they're now sort of figuring out the challenge of how, as a central regional organizations, they can bring these cloud migration and implementation of AI together, right? But let us first deep dive into cloud migration as a topic, right? And I think, Kriti, this is close to you. But how do you see the integration of new tech with legacy systems, right? That can be very tricky, especially the API connections between these multiple systems. Then there's firewalls and security issues, and possibly some older systems which might not have uh, been designed or made to be adopted to cloud native environments, right? So, what do you see as the biggest hurdles that BFS enterprises would encounter, and how do you think they can overcome them?
Thanks, Suman, for that question. And you rightly said legacy is something that you cannot ignore in the BFS context. To understand what are the hurdles that banks face, I know all this talk around cloud, AI, all of it seems very alluring and seems very attractive, but we have to get down to the ground realities, as in how do you execute on some of these plans. So to at least take stock of what are the big challenges, I think we need to go back in time and also look at how these banking systems have evolved. In many of these cases, they have these systems have been monolithic. They have been built from ground up. They do not, many of the times the systems do not talk to each other. So for example, I think just last year when we were talking to one of the CIOs of a bank, and that CIO was also responsible for the lending business. What the CIO was telling us that, hey, I have these multiple lending products that my bank offers, but all of the lending products have these separate systems. So for a retail loan, I have something else. For a commercial loan, there's something else. For a mortgage, I have something else, and so on. And all of these systems do not talk to each other. At times, at least on the consumer lending side, I end up targeting the same customers because my systems do not talk to each other. So I think the problem of legacy, the problem of monolithic system is still very, very real and still a very big hindrance. I think the next piece that makes it really difficult is, as you navigate, as your bank goes through the day-to-day operations, hey, do you have the complete data and process maps? I think that is one big gap we see in many places, because at times there are these broken flows, broken processes, or at times there are cases where people don't know where the data is flowing from. And what you don't know, you can't really modify or modernize. So I think that is the second piece. And last, I think the biggest challenge that comes in is, you touched upon it, Suman, the compliance bit, right? It's all very nice to say and hear about that, hey, we want to modernize, but then you have to keep up pace with the regulations that come in. There are so many reporting guidelines you have to keep on following. At times you need to maintain logs of all these records, right? So all of these things at times hold banks back. But I think solving the challenge is also the fun part in many of the cases. I think when I was speaking to one of the clients, they said modernizing a banking system is like performing a heart surgery, and the heart needs to continue beating, right? You do not have the luxury to okay, let's figure out what's the best tool I have, and then I will get started with the surgery. So I think that was an interesting corollary I heard from that stakeholder. But on a more serious note, think with all these challenges, you still need to have these data process maps in place. I think that is the first step. You need to take stock of where you are. Then you need to take stock of, hey, what are the priorities your bank has, and why do you want to modernize, right? It can't be a spur of the moment decision. Hey, everyone around me is moving to cloud. Everyone around me is having these fancy customer UI UX. No, but for you as a bank, what are the priorities that you need to meet? What are the business priorities? Say what is the responsibility you have to serve your customers better? So all of these weave in. that how do you tackle these challenges, and then you design a strategy going forward.
Right. I mean, the hesitation to adopt cloud no longer seems to be a like valid hesitation, right? In the sense of you will be left behind if you don't move to cloud. That is something which you have touched upon, Kriti. But it seems to be a game changer. And um, what would drive this transformation across the different markets, right? How would cloud adoption vary, and what will be the drivers for each of these geolocations?
Yeah, and that's very interesting, right? Because I think the slide that we just had, which was talking about the levels of the maturity, I think that is a very interesting layout and an interesting analysis that we did, because within APAC there are these different countries and different regions that have their own story to tell, right? So we cannot paint entire APAC region with the same brush. So if we look at that entire cloud maturity modeling that we did, right, and if we can have that slide back up, I would like to spend a minute on that, please. So if we look at the various geographic regions, and this is an interesting analysis we did at the start of in the start of this year, in the first 2 quarters in H1 precisely. So we try to do a level of maturity versus the degree of cloud adoption across these different geographies, and we try to segment it into three buckets. So level one, level two, level three, as you can see. So level one was where, okay, the cloud maturity was slightly on the lower side for enterprises, and the demand was mostly around, how do I migrate my workloads to the cloud? So that's where the conversation was. I know Thailand is there, and many of the people on this discussion right now might be thinking, hey, but Thailand is issuing all these digital banking licenses, right? So there are three licenses that are up for grab in 2025, but Thailand still remains a very heavy branch banking market if you look at it, right? So it's heavily branch based banking, and that's where we see this segment to be thinking about mostly around how do I migrate my workloads to cloud. Level two is where we go one level up. We see it's a fragmented market, right? See, maturity levels are very, very different. You will have some countries, so like a country like in Vietnam, there is Cake by VP Bank. It has launched, it has collaborated with Visa and launched a cloud-based card management system, right? So, and that at one end you will have other geographies in varying levels of adoption, but the supply ecosystem for services again remains very fragmented, right? So we cannot say with a single brush that, okay, Malaysia has the right set of talent pool available, right set of system integrators, the tech providers available, right? It is varying across this region, but this is a region that has a lot of opportunity also. And lastly, if you look at the level three, which is your entire ANZ region, I think Japan, Singapore, India, China, this is where we see some, these are like front runners, this heavy demand for cloud teams. There is a lot of strong playground for service providers and tech providers to come in. I think very recently we were seeing that Tencent had rolled out a strategic partnership with Visa and to introduce a palm recognition technology, right? So with the palm, the technology recognizes palm to ensure digital payments, right? So you see this spectrum, right? At one end, you have banks evaluating, do I move to cloud? What do I move to cloud? At one end, you have banks and these payment providers coming up with these offerings, these new age. And I know, Pranati, you are a very big front runner and very bullish on AI adoption. So I think you have these maturing levels of spectrum across all of it. So and APAC, I think personally for me, APAC presents a very big opportunity as well in terms of how do you see the cloud continuum play out, and how does the ecosystem then need to respond to it?
So what I've understood, Kriti, is that it will not be a like a sort of single solution for all regions, and I think the banks and service providers and other stakeholders in the ecosystem need to come together to possibly
Yeah.
tailor the solutions to each of these geos.
Yes, and the way, at least I think, to look at APAC is, and we tend to use this 3E framework for APAC, which is like enterprise, ecosystem, and the economic scenario. So from an enterprise perspective, across the board, I think one thing is clear: be it level one, level two, level three, the propensity and the preference to outsource is high. They're looking to outsource a lot of these services. They're looking to partner. So that propensity in itself, I think, is very good. Overall, the optimism and thinking about the digital readiness or the willingness to go to that digital readiness is also very, very important. from I think a spend perspective, if I look at it globally, almost a quarter of be it banking and financial services outsourcing services spend can be attributed to APAC, right? So that's a sizable number in itself. And coming to the secondary on the ecosystem, I think the talent bit is APAC has always been touted having that right set of talent. We have seen the global providers come up to APAC, look for that right set of skills, the new age skills, the next gen skills at time. And we have a lot of the SIs that have set up shop in the region. We have technology partners also providing support along the way. And lastly, I think economic, Suman and Pranati, we touched upon it already, right? The region has strong fundamentals. There is strong push also to help the startup ecosystem develop, right? In all these geographies, we see that push. We see these policies that are that have been put in place to help the fintech ecosystem thrive. So I think all of these make APAC very very lucrative, and cloud modernization has a big role to play.
Right. Uh, that's very interesting, Kriti. I think we have a question on the technologies that are being adopted to minimize risk and detect fraud. That's interesting. That's something which is very close to me. And what I've seen is that, interestingly, generative AI is being one of them, right? Especially in adverse media screening. But Pranati, Kriti, do you see the others picking up? How are they sort of helping minimize risk, especially with the cyber criminals and financial criminals becoming smarter with the use of similar technologies as well, right? Which they seem to have greater access to as compared to the banks. So how do you see that playing?
Yeah, yeah, I let me take that up first, and Kriti, feel free to add on. I think you also cover the risk and compliance space in detail when it comes to technology. So in the APAC banking and financial services sector, fighting fraud and staying compliant might feel like you're trying to juggle flaming swords. Challenging, but you really need to have the right set of tools, and in this case, it's again it's technology. Again, I am alluding to the world of advanced technology. So AI ML is definitely they are your brain detectives, spotting fraud in real time, tackling AML. I think this is something we just spoke about. RPA, how is again a digital office worker. It's going to automate your compliance tasks. Cutting down a lot of human error that may percolate. Uh, Biometric authentication. I think Kriti gave a fantastic example around how fingerprints, facial recognition that can keep your accounts more secure and in a locked world. Blockchain, I think we have not alluded to it in our conversations so far.
Yeah.
That also serves as a very unbreakable ledger, and especially when it comes to KYC processes. Advanced data analytics, real time monitoring and scoring can be again a game changer in terms of overall regulatory updates. Cloud, it's again offering very flexible secured home for data. NLP, you cannot run AI algorithms until and unless you have a very robust cloud computing system there. Cybersecurity, last but not least, is something where investments have now become sort of like hygiene. It's mandatory. It's going to protect against breaches. It's going to give you behavioral analytics, tracking overall user activity, and if they spot something fishy, it's brought out as a red flag. We've seen that happening at a very faster rate. Similarly, digital identity solutions. I know, Suman, this is again very very important to you. You've been tracking this space for quite some time. So again, digital identity is combining biometrics, blockchain, making sure you verify customers securely. So all of that we've seen salient examples within the APAC market. APAC BFS market. They're taking in some shape or the form. They are forward looking, but yes, we are still there when it comes to reaching a mass scale. But yes, we are seeing those early early buds flowering. So that's
Yeah.
the thing we've observed. Kriti, over to you to add more perspective.
I think Pranti, Suman, you have covered most of it. I want to add one final piece to it. So while all these technologies are there, I think there is increasing importance also being placed amongst financial services enterprise for sharing data to
Hmm.
minimize risk, and how can they tackle things together, right? So at times fraudsters or these agents or these threat agents will not be looking at particular bank. They may try to bring down two three banks together at times, right? So how can we have this financial crime risk information sharing? I think just earlier this year the Singapore regulators launched a digital platform, Cosmic was the name, which was around how do you defend against money laundering, terrorism financing, how do you help these commercial banks to share data with one another if some of these cases occur, right? So that's where I think we're seeing this increasing push, and not just in APAC but globally, that now the enterprises need to come together. And I think with the advent of open banking, the focus on data sharing already is in focus. It's more to do with then how the ecosystem comes together as a unit to fight this threat. So
I
that
agree
piece.
with I agree with both of you, Pranati and Kriti. I think critical points, right? One thing I have seen is like the consortium which you talked about. It's going beyond banks, right? Now the banks and non-banks, even insurance enterprises, trying to share data across to build a 360-degree customer profile, right? And it's extending to both individual and entities, the retail and commercial customers, that is trying to identify the ultimate beneficiary owner, mapping the relationships between different related parties, etc. So I think that an enhanced liveliness check, and possibly the advanced versions of KYC is what we are seeing in APAC as well, right? Biometrics and the AIU based liveliness checks. I think we'll see more of this going ahead, because to stay, I think one of the cases which we have seen in recently in Singapore is about a $1 million fraud happening due to deep fake profiles. So if banks in APAC have to stay ahead of the criminals, they have to bring together the data, they have to be able to bring in efficiencies, reduce false positives, enhance their rules in such a way that they can overcome or think about new scenarios which possibly the criminals are thinking through. So I think collaboration is a key aspect of it, and bringing together stuff across the organization is also a key aspect of it. Partnering with fintechs, regulators, with advisory firms, operations tech innovators, I think this will help real-time detection of fraud and prevention. But jumping on to the next topic, I think for the banks in APAC, customer experience has been a key topic, right? And with rise of digital channels, we see that customers are demanding for enhanced experience. And how do you see this in APAC, Pranti, and how does it shape the strategies within the BFS enterprises?
Thanks, Suman. If we look at the Asia Pacific financial services, space, enhancing customer experience, I was talking about how they're keeping customer at the center, how customer centricity is so important for them. It's significantly reshaping their strategies. Across organizations, we're seeing that there is a focus on digital innovation. Asia Pacific banks, they are increasingly recognizing that exceptional customer service, customer experience, CX, is going to be a key ingredient to stay ahead of the competition. It's a fast evolving market landscape. We spoke about how the ecosystem is evolving. There are so many fintechs also in the market. So if you have to stay ahead of the competition, it's important that you invest in experience. There's investments across digital solutions, across how do you operationalize you streamline some of these complex operations. The shift is driven by the customer demand, and the demand is centered around personalization, around seamlessness, around making the interactions very fast. And last but not the least, you are also ensuring that you're covering a lot of digital channels. So you're from a channel standpoint also, you need to be very well covered when it comes to the Asia Pacific banking market. It's important to have the brick and mortar bank at the same time. All your digital channels seem to be clicking at the same, the same very moment. Banks are adopting a digital first approach. They're leveraging all the technologies we talk about, we just gave a view about. And again, they're looking at how do I tailor the services, anticipating the customer needs beforehand, creating a very enhanced engagement across various platforms. We call it, the framework that we use here at Everest Group is super banking experiences. I think Kriti, Suman, Kriti, you're also aware of that. So when we say super, it alludes to, your services being superior. It's also U stands for ubiquitous, P stands for personalized, E is easy or streamlined, and R stand for how you make it more and more resilient. So this is the framework that we have been talking about to the enterprises also. So when I think you are on mute.
Sorry.
Yeah.
So, while customer experience is a key topic for banks, Pranati, I think the employee experience also plays out quite importantly, right? You can't sort of disassociate each other, right? And we have seen lesser of branch banking and more digital channels picking up, right? So, how do you see the employee experience part playing out and technology intervening there as well, in addition to customer experience?
Yeah. So again, within employee experience, I think for financial services or the cap market side, it's slightly more crucial because when you're doing financial advisory, that's where having that sense of customer data becomes crucial. Empowering your internal teams is becoming more and more important. In APAC, we've seen that some banks, they aren't just keeping up with the times. They're practically sort of enabling their employees to predict the future. There are several BFS firms who've taken experience to a next level. They're embracing technology. I think Kriti spoke about the DBS example. It's been a trailblazer using AI, ML, creating a digibank platform of their own. Making sure money management is almost effortless. This is the forward thinking approach that wherein you can just don't just talk about the users, the customers. We talk about the internal stakeholders also. We talk about empowering the your agents also. So that's fueled by a very impressive growth in overall digital transaction and overall spend that is being pushed by the banking financial services firms within the APAC market.
Right, I think the latest trends which we have seen is possibly systems also connecting the front office, back office part of it, right? The employees having access to something which they didn't have access before in terms of data and information, through which they're able to take on the spur decisions, right? And more use of Gen AI and the customer experience space as well, helping them understand the sentiments of customers and fine tuning their conversation based on what is detected as a frustrated customer or a happy customer, etc. Right? So interesting things coming across to help customers be happy across the journey and reduce the friction which the banks have with the customers throughout the process, right? Especially in areas like bereavement and possibly in retirement space and other areas. But yeah, this is quite interesting.
I know there's a lot of discussion, and we've talked about cloud, we have talked about experience, and we are seeing questions also coming in from the audience around what are some of these technologies that hamper and that can help in detecting fraud in a more streamlined manner. But I have another question to ask you, Suman, given you have been doing so much questioning in the last 20-25 minutes to us. One thing I also am curious to know, and given this is an area that you also track very, very closely, so as this focus goes on to cloud, as you think about expanding the entire digital services spectrum, we see a lot of APAC banks are investing in cybersecurity measures, right? How do they protect the sensitive financial data? How do they protect their own entire technology estate? So how do you see, right? What are some of these proactive measures that organizations should be taking as they think about innovation, but they have to balance out the laws, the regulation, the compliance, because it is, you like Pranati said, right? You are juggling too many things at the same time. So what is your take on that?
Yeah. I think to add to that, Kriti, the challenge has been that the policies have actually been slower in terms of implementation. I think the regulators have not been able to preempt some of these risks, right? And retrospective implementation of certain things is also uh, bringing in challenges which the banks and financial institutions have not anticipated before, right? Um, there is a huge rise in cost of compliance as well, which is pressurizing them to take only smaller steps, whereas the criminals have been or the fraudulent actors have been making strides and jumps into these areas, right? So what we are seeing is that depending on where the banks and financial institutions are in terms of maturity, the measures they are taking in terms of cybersecurity, risk prevention, detection, monitoring, etc., varies. The smaller banks are more premature in terms of identifying who the internal security advisors would be, what kind of applications are at risk, what kind of infrastructure elements are at risk, where are these hosted, what kind of communication these systems have with the external applications, etc. They're figuring out that journey, and they're figuring out how they can comply with real-time monitoring and reporting to regulators, especially say like in India you have certain which demands for incident reporting at a regular frequency, but that would mean that all your internal stakeholders have to come together and work out to be able to meet those standards. Then you have regular identity access management checks, you have the SOC being established. So depending on where you are, the banks would see that investment rise and possibly mature. The larger banks we're seeing are more capable to handle cybersecurity risks. However, the challenge there seems to be the growing ecosystem of applications. So from that perspective, they have to continuously evolve and monitor those aspects of it. Especially in India, you need to have a CISO dedicated to look at the cybersecurity measures. You need to have internal auditors, external auditors reviewing at a frequent interval. The information all together documented and kept together so that you can share these with the ethical hackers and the banking regulators at the earliest. So more awareness, more training being spread within the employees, especially for phishing attacks and such. That we are seeing more APAC banks educating their customers about it, implementing multi-factor authentication and other critical technology aspects of it. So yeah, it's very daunting and it's very challenging for banks to keep up with the regulations and the criminals.
I agree. I agree. I think it can be quite daunting, but I think that's where the fun is, right? You have to keep up with the challenges. You need to be continuously innovating at the same time complying with the regulations, and you need to also think about securing your technology estate. So I think all very interesting. I'm seeing a few interesting questions also coming our way. I think, Pranti, do you want to Pranti and Suman, do you want to pick up maybe one or two of those?
Yeah,
Sure, I
yeah. I
think
think there's one. Sorry,
yeah,
Suman.
please go ahead.
Yeah. So I think this one that we are seeing on inputs around regulatory changes in Asia Pacific, especially around AI. Suman, feel free to add your views as well. At least from the Asia Pacific banking environment, we are seeing regulatory frameworks on around AI. They are evolving to balance innovation and protection. I think that's the key message that we want to drive. The developments include a shift towards more like a structured governance, more around targeted compliance measures for AI systems. So, and especially around the high risk use cases, around generative AI. I think Kriti alluded to how the gamut is changing with agentic AI coming up. So if you look at countries such as Japan and Australia, they are adopting frameworks to ensure that AI operates ethically. They are emphasizing on transparency and fairness. Japan, they are taking a very human centric approach, supporting voluntary industry efforts around introducing stricter laws for very impactful Gen AI models. So they're sort of sourcing a lot of this from the industry itself. Similarly, Australia is also refining its regulation inspired by the EU Act. They're also looking at safety guidelines for high risk AI. On the other hand, if you look at Singapore, it's advancing with AI testing. So their focus is, if I have tools such as AI Verify, which ensure system compliance with international ethics principles. Similarly, South Korea and India, they are focusing on nurturing AI while ensuring trustworthiness. So enabling the system to be trustworthy itself. South Korea, they are recently enhancing its Personal Information Protection Act to address AI-driven decisions. So, just to conclude, if you look at AI's role in the banking and financial services environment, and as it grows, the regulations are also evolving at a very fast pace. And that's good news from the APAC market. If you look at the regimes, they're evolving at that kind of a pace. The focus is on responsible deployment while allowing financial institutions to innovate. I think balancing innovation and protection, I think, is the key message. I think, Suman, you were also alluding to how they are juggling. So I think that's the central message. Over to you,
Yeah,
Kriti, Suman.
I think the regulatory scrutiny has only increased over time, Pranati. In my opinion, the regulators have become smarter, and the capacity to audit and understand which banks and financial institutions are not following the rules and regulations. They're able to do it a lot better now. The fines and the enforcement actions globally have actually increased. This is not just because and some of these are retrospective, right? This is primarily because regulators have become smarter to assess and understand where there are gaps in the banks and financial institutions. So in my personal opinion, even though the cost of compliance is high, the banks and FIs can't ignore these aspects of especially data privacy, security, and then prevention of fraud, financial crime compliance, etc. Because in the end, they should not act as um, a channel for criminals to transfer money across different local and cross-border areas, right? So they have to step up, and even if there are regulations which are lagging, they should think beyond and kind of implement some of the modern tech to solve these issues.
Think that's it's very very interesting to hear, because Pranati, as I hear you, I see across the region there are these varying levels of regulation, or at least if not regulation, some broad guidelines. And Suman, as I hear you, I see that similar piece coming out. And I'm also seeing from the audience, right, Pranati, when you were talking about these regulations, there's an interesting question: what happens if there is no compliance in AI, right? And I know we're just jumping onto the opposite side of things. So what happens if there's no compliance, right? Can we get any further? I think as at least as I think about it, it's okay. It's a world out there, or even let's say in the banking system, or a banking system out there, when there is no compliance on AI, right? As I think about it, how do you solve for the biases that can then come in, right? If you don't have any compliance, or any guidelines in place, right? How do you ensure a lot of the customer data, how are you protecting it, or you're not misusing that data in some form or the other? Will lack of compliance hinder competitiveness in the industry, right? I mean, those are the questions that come to my mind. I don't know about you, Pranati, Suman, what are your thoughts, right? It's an interesting question.
Yeah, and this is my personal opinion that guardrails are necessary. Now, the level of guardrails, that's a debatable topic in terms of how stringent can regulators be. and really do some of these laws make sense in the greater scheme of things. If you compare with the benefits that AI can bring in, especially financial inclusion and the education and other aspects of financial inclusion as well, right? So for me, it's a balance which the regulators need to arrive at in collaboration with the ecosystem, and they should not take decisions on their own. If they formulate policies which are very stringent, they're actually crushing the benefits which possibly AI could bring in. And as per Ray Kurzweil, I think we are looking at singularity in 2040s. With so many regulations in place, I'm not sure if Ray's predictions will come true, right? Especially if you want to connect brain with the AI systems. So that's interesting to see, and I think there is something called as over regulation versus under regulation. So I think the fine balance needs to be there, in my opinion.
Yeah. So, I think the conversation has really been interesting. We're shifting gears from looking at modernization. We're looking at cloud. We're looking at AI. Very interesting questions around, how the AI spectrum will move ahead. We recently wrote a blog, and, I think the headline message was that, it's the way AI is progressing, it's faster than the way quarterly results are coming up. We've seen technology shifting at a very fast pace. Having said that, we are offering a the listeners to download a complimentary abstract of our one of our recent research pieces on the Asia Pacific banking market. The title of the report is mentioned, evolving horizons, comprehensive exploration of transformative trends in the Asia Pacific BFS industry. So, we are offering that. Feel free to consume the content at your end. Get back to Suman, Kriti, or I, if you have any questions. So we would be happy to focus on that. And with that, we would I would definitely want to hear you, Suman, talk about what is the future outlook that you're seeing in terms of the Asia Pacific banking financial services market. Anything that is sort of striking, that you're noticing, that you're observing, that we spoke a lot about the overall spectrum, but anything that is sort of standing out, or your central message for the future of Asia Pacific banking, what would that central message be?
I think for me, I'm very optimistic about banking in APAC and the modernization and transformation of the banks here. With the rise in like positive economic outlook, rise in growth, lesser inflation coming in, and the economy growing, especially in the Asia Pacific region, I see banks being better placed with respect to their global counterparts, right, in terms of investing and making the most of this time, especially with customers demanding for enhanced customer experience, the employees hoping for more efficiency and more better work-life balance, and the rise of AI as a technology tool enabler. I see only positive things, right? And from my perspective, I think banks, fintechs, regtechs, and other stakeholders, including regulators, coming together in APAC, trying to solve some of these key issues of regulatory compliance, cybersecurity. I think that will only increase in future, especially the consortiums, data sharing, and other aspects of it. Um, I also see the sustainability part, which you touched upon, Pranati, rising, especially when you have more stable systems, and there is this climate risk and geopolitical risks kicking in. There is also this fear of modernization taking away jobs and other aspects of it, right? However, the banks and financial institutions will invest more on sustainability. But Pranat, if you want to add a little bit of color to this topic, it will be helpful, I believe, for the audience. But I see this rising as well.
Yeah, so again, from a sustainability standpoint, we've seen different. Our research indicates that every market is actually behaving like a micro market. We analyze the regulatory maturity, and that's what you see here on the screen. Be it markets such as India, Singapore, they are high on the curve. Even China, for that matter, they're high on the curve. Yes, there's a lot of ground to cover. There's a road ahead, but banks across APAC, even the regulatory regimes, are thinking in that direction. Last but not the least, on the flip side, I wanted to highlight two particular challenges which Asia Pacific banking and financial service industry is definitely facing. I see a question around the orientation which service providers should take. I think there is a huge challenge around talent shortage and skill gaps, be it around AI, be it around blockchain. All our models, all our talent models, we have a separate talent practice within the broader Everest Group organization, and all our models indicate that the skill gap is huge. Digital talent in areas such as AI, data science, cybersecurity, cloud, all of these, there is a shortage of skilled professionals. So how do you, as a service provider, I think one key message would be that how do you train and retain your resources at the very right time. And why it's important is because BFS firms, they itself are facing intense competition to get that digital talent. A banking financial services firm is at the crossroads. It's sort of fighting for talent with some of the larger technology firms in the market. So we need to ensure that reskilling programs are very robust. It could be time consuming, it could be resource intensive, but that's the right approach to go. And last but not the least, I think the industry itself is very cost constrained. There is a huge pressure in terms of ROI. So I think Kriti alluded to points around modernization, how there is a need for significant investments in technology, in talent, in process reengineering. So at the same time, when we are talking about moving ahead in technology, how do you balance it with the cost? So you're making that long term investment as a bank, but it could be challenging to secure. So as a service provider, can you create a piecemeal approach for the enterprise? Can you create it as a progressive modernization journey rather than a big bang? So that could be one of two of these opportunities for service providers also in the overall market. Kriti, feel free to add your perspective. Suman, same here.
Yeah, I think what you said, Pranati, makes complete sense. I know modernization in itself can seem a daunting task, and I'm seeing a few questions also in the chat around what happens after modernization, right? What next? So I think the answer to that question is there is still a host of new technologies, new systems, new experiences you need to be continuously innovating on, because modernization does not stop in one point of time. I know there are these niche skills that are required at times to look at the mainframe systems, but then you also need to keep up, upskill and reskill for the new skills of the future, right? So I would say from an employee standpoint, the opportunities are huge. As you help your bank transform, the bank will be continuously in need of new talent, new partners to support. So the opportunity out there is immense. I think that's the only piece I wanted to add. And was Suman, any thoughts from you?
No, I think I would want to end with a positive note that I don't think this will impact the jobs which we are thinking of. I think it will only enhance our lives in a better way, even though there might be some short-term shifts. But in the long term, I'm hoping for a more optimistic, positive outlook, especially doing better things with my life in terms of quality of life and other aspects of it. And yes, the modern technology, I'm looking forward to AI, quantum, and all those things coming together to help solve pertinent problems, especially financial inclusion. So, very positive, optimistic about the APAC banking scenario. Um, with this, I would like to thank everyone for joining in this session. Hope this was useful, and we're happy to engage with the audience in terms of any queries you have, anything which we can help you address. Looking forward to having more conversations. Thank you, Pranati and Kriti, for this session, and hoping to connect with you again.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for your time today. Thank you. Bye bye.
Thanks, man.